So hi everyone, my name is Colleen Strawhecker and I'm joined by my colleagues in the section for Arctic Sciences, Dr. Roberto Delgado and Dr. Greg Anderson. And we're here just to give you kind of a quick overview to our new solicitation for doctoral dissertation research improvement grants. The number is NSF 2597 if you want to Google it and look it up. But before we get started, we thought it would be a good idea just to do a quick poll to get an idea of who is in the audience. I see a lot of new names. So we were hoping to just get an idea of whether you are a PhD student or maybe an advisor to a PhD student, or you're just here to learn more. So Liz, if you can go ahead and launch the poll. And so, yeah, you can see here, you can just kind of say, why you're here. Also, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We would love to hear more about kind of who you are, so we can kind of better tailor our talk to you. And I'm so glad to see so many PhD students here. I'm seeing that 19 of you are PhD students, 20. It's really good to see so many early career people thinking about taking advantage of this opportunity. Let's see, Liz, can people see this poll before we end it? Or am I just
once I end it, folks will be able, I'll be able to show it to folks.
Okay, cool. So yeah, thank you, Melissa. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat too, if you are comfortable doing so. So it's really good to hear. Yeah, so Liz just shared the results. So you can see that 20 of you are PhD students, one advisor, and a couple of other, I know we have some of our NSF colleagues in the room too that I can introduce at the end of the talk as well. So welcome everyone. It's really good to have you here, and I'm hoping this webinar is helpful. And we left plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so stay tuned. So with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Roberto.
Thank you, Colleen, and appreciate you advancing the slides to the next one. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, whether it's afternoon or morning in your location. As Colleen indicated, we're here to provide an overview of this new solicitation that we published. And I'll begin sort of with the administrative issues in terms of, we have a cover sheet of the first page of the solicitation, which is really the main starting point, not just for this particular opportunity, but for all NSF funding opportunities. So, definitely use this as a reference document because it provides a lot of information and resources, including a more thorough description of the funding program, points of contact for the different participant programs we'll be describing shortly, as well as basic eligibility information, proposal preparation, submission instructions, including levels on budgets and due dates, et cetera, as well as some of the main review criteria, award conditions, and other reporting requirements that are part of this program. Next slide, please, Colleen. My purpose in this next slide is just to reiterate the primary goals or aims of this Doctoral Dissertation Research Improvement Grant, or DDRIG solicitation. And similar to other doctoral dissertation program solicitations across NSF, one of the primary aims, of course, is to enhance and improve the conduct of doctoral dissertation projects in many different fields and disciplines. And for our program, specifically within the Office of Polar Programs and Section for Arctic Sciences, our other goal is also to support early career students within the Arctic Sciences, as well as to expand and clarify the proposal submission process for these doctoral dissertation research improvement grants within the Arctic Sciences section. Next slide, please, Colleen. The last thing I'll be describing today is just some of the overarching themes that we are keen on supporting in the Arctic Sciences section and through the Doctoral Dissertation Research Improvement Grant. And these include advancing a fundamental process or systems level understanding of the Arctic's rapidly changing natural environments, including social and cultural systems. And where appropriate, we'll discuss a little bit more perhaps in the Q&A, as well as in our program descriptions, ways to improve our capacity to project future change within the Arctic and its impacts on other regions of the planet. I think Colleen is going to return to help us through the next few slides.
Yeah, so thanks, Roberto, for that quick overview to the solicitation. And I think what is critical about the solicitation is that you have 3 different programs that you can submit your proposal to. One is the Arctic Observing Network. Roberto, do you want to give a quick overview of AON since that is your program?
Sure. So one of the things about Arctic Science is that we have different programs here that can fit different interests. I manage the Arctic Observing Network, which is primarily geared towards supporting field observations to detect and understand Arctic system change, as described on the slide, as well as generating new data that are intended for wider use by the scientific research community. Of course, realistically, under current times and conditions, there are limited opportunities for Arctic field work due to pandemic, travel, health restrictions, limitations on embarking on research vessel cruises and other types of in situ observations. So one of the areas that the AON program can still continue to support Arctic science research, I think, is by encouraging projects using different approaches such as remote sensing technologies or syntheses, as well as contributing to Arctic system modeling and related types of projects, some of which can take advantage of long-term data sets that are housed at the NSF-funded Arctic Data Center and or other national data repositories. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Roberto. Another program that you can submit to is the Arctic Social Sciences program. Unfortunately, the program officer, Dr. Erica Hill, couldn't make it today, but I'll give a quick overview since I am a social scientist and can describe it very well. And so for the Arctic Social Sciences program, we really support the study of Arctic social and cultural systems, present and past, and research relevant to understanding these systems. So that includes any social science field that's covered under the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate at NSF, and really, and most particularly, really has a special interest in a wide range of Indigenous scholarship, and I apologize, Indigenous should be capitalized there, as well as co-produced research. And as many of you may know, the Arctic Social Sciences program has been supporting doctoral dissertation improvement grants for a long time now. And this solicitation actually formalizes the call and provides you with much more guidance on how to actually submit that proposal to there. The other program is ARCSS, or Arctic System Science. Greg, do you want to take ARCSS?
Sure, thanks, Colleen. And hi, everybody. I'm Greg Anderson. I'm a program officer working with Colleen on the Arctic System Science program, among other things. And ARCSS is, based on, as you can tell, based on the name, really is interested in studies that are going to look at the Arctic as a system and how that interacts with the Earth system as a whole. But Colleen and I take a very broad view of system. We're looking at things at a variety of scales in space, in time, and a variety of levels of complexity. We're interested in particular in how various processes come together to make a system. So if you've got a question, a research topic that is about different sorts of things going on in the Arctic that cross different processes, cross different components together into something, that's kind of where ARCSS's emphasis is. And there's a lot of dialogue among all three of these programs to make sure that we're talking across the program boundaries to find the right place for projects.
Thanks, Greg. And Greg actually set me up perfectly for the next point that I wanted to make, was that you probably heard the description of these programs and thought you might have a clear idea of where exactly your project might live, but there's quite a bit of overlap among these programs too, not surprisingly. And so as Greg alluded to, is that we all work together and have really good communication to try to figure out kind of where your proposal should best live. It might live in 2 different programs, so we often co-review between ARCSS and Arctic Social Sciences, or AON and Arctic System Science. So what it would be critical as you begin formulating your project and thinking about writing your proposal is to reach out to who the program officer you think might fit best for your project. So for AON, it's Roberto. For Arctic Social Sciences program, it would be Erica. And then for ARCSS would be Greg or myself. So feel free to reach out to us if you feel totally lost in trying to figure out where you think your proposal should live. This solicitation also has really clear descriptions of the programs too that will be really good resources as you try to formulate your project. So some of the things that we wanted to bring up just to make it really clear as you were moving forward to thinking about submitting your DDRIG proposal. Note that there's only 2 submissions allowed per student. So you can submit 1 proposal and then you can revise and resubmit should you receive should your first proposal be declined. The reason we want to bring this up is that you want to be really sure that you're ready to submit a doctoral dissertation research improvement grant. So this will be working very closely with your PhD advisor and making sure that you have a very clear project in mind as you're moving forward. Again, your program officers are going to be really good resources to try to figure out whether you're ready or not. The other thing is that the budget for these proposals are up to $40,000 for up to 3 years in duration. The important thing to note about this $40,000 that these are only direct costs. Overhead rates are in addition to that 40K or on top of that 40K. So if you have a university that has maybe a 52% overhead rate, that overhead rate is in addition to that 40K. So all of your direct costs can be included in that $40,000. If that is not clear, we can talk about the Q&A. We can kind of clarify that in the Q&A after our talk. And with that, I will hand it over to Greg.
Thanks. And so I want to talk just briefly for folks about the process that we're going to use to review your proposals when they come in. So first off, we have 2 deadlines each year in the solicitation. The first is the 15th of December this year, and then there'll be another one in May on the 17th of May, 2021. And then the idea is to have it on December 15th and May 15th, or as close as that is possible, every year from then on. The idea, once you submit the proposals, and this is true, and perhaps I'll explain a little more than I would under other circumstances, the review process. When we get your proposals, we're going to look at them to make sure that they meet the requirements of the solicitation, that there isn't something that's just not compliant, and we'll deal with that. But we go through that, and then it's our job as program officers to find experts who have the appropriate background, the appropriate understanding to review your proposals and give us feedback on what we call the intellectual merit and the broader impacts aspects of this. And we'll talk a little bit more about where a good place to get a resource on that, what those 2 things are. But to have, we're going to be looking for reviewers who can tell us what their perspective is on the proposal that you've put before us. Those are typically done in 2 groups. One is called ad hoc, and that's where we send your proposal out, somebody reads it and sends us back a written review. There's also a panel review where we're bringing a group of experts together. These days it's virtual, just like this. We've done a lot of virtual panels, but we have people together and they come from a broad range of backgrounds to look at the proposals that have come together as a group before them and give us their recommendations on the quality of the proposal. Our goal is for when your proposal comes in, so December 15th, our goal would be to get you an answer back within 6 months. It does take a fair bit of time because we want to do a thorough job of getting a good review for your proposal. And we want to treat your proposals with the care that you treated them in sending them to us and making sure that we're giving a good review. So that's sort of a timeline for that kind of thing. And if people have questions about the review process more generally, we could certainly tag on that at the questions at the end. Thanks, Colleen. So I made reference to there's a good place to go for all this sort of thing. This is a document that if you're going to continue to be submitting proposals to NSF is a place to go to understand how NSF proposals work and when you get an award, how the awards work. It's called the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, or the PAPG. You may hear people refer to it as the GPG. It used to be called the Grant Proposal Guide. If nothing else, we are an acronym-rich environment in NSF. You will learn that fast. But the PAPPG lays out all of the NSF-wide submission requirements and information about the various types of proposals at NSF. And then if you take that document and the solicitation for this program, you kind of have the total picture of what you need to have to submit a proposal. One really important thing I'll hit on is make sure that when you're looking at this document that you're looking at the most recent version. It gets revised very regularly, and on the main web page, and the link is there on the slide. If you click on the 2019 version, that's no longer applicable. It's the 2020 version that we're using. Next year, it might, will be in 2021, and so on and so forth. So make sure you're looking at the most recent version. And the one thing I guess I would say is, I wouldn't recommend reading this cover to cover in any one period of time, because it is a complex document with a lot of information. And I think what's more important is to know that it's there. And if you have a question that isn't answered in the solicitation, you can look there to try to get the answers. And then, as Colleen said, if you don't know, you can always come to us and talk to us to get answers. So thanks, Colleen. So this leads to kind of the take-home messages that I think we all want to leave with you on this one. Is we really encourage you to read the solicitation carefully and thoroughly, because it really does lay out the rules for this program and how we would like the proposals to come in. But it also gives you information about the programs. It gives you information about the goals. So you read that. If you have questions after reading that, go and look at the PAPPG to try to get the answers, okay? And then you have the sort of the rules that you're working under. And then as you and your advisor are developing your proposal, developing your project, it's a really good idea to put together kind of a 1 or 2 page document that summarizes the main ideas intellectually of what you want to do, what your approaches might be, generally how the project would work, and then reach out to one of us. I can't emphasize this enough. I know that it can be intimidating to call, or even to email an NSF program officer. It really doesn't need to be. We're here to help you. That's our job. We want to work with you. So these days, when we're all working remotely, the best thing is to send us an email and send us your 1-pager when you do, and then we'll have a time to reach out to you for a phone call and talk about questions that you may have about the program. We really do want you to reach out to us if you have questions. Please don't feel like that's a bad idea. And I think I'm handing this back to you, Colleen.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And I just wanted to reiterate, I know NSF program officers can seem scary at times, but one of my favorite parts of the job is talking to PIs and potential PIs. I love being able to talk about the really cool science that we may be able to fund. So I just want to reiterate what Greg said, that please don't feel nervous about reaching out to us. But I wanted to provide some other really good resources too that are kind of operating at a higher level than the kind of nitty-gritty detail that we're getting into with this webinar. And these are just resources that provide general information about submitting proposals to NSF. The website nsfpolicyoutreach.com is a new one that's been put together that provides really good training resources on how to submit NSF grants. We often hold navigating NSF panels at conferences when in-person meetings resume. That being said, we actually just received an email this morning that our colleagues in GEO will be holding an online navigating NSF panel on December 2nd at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And when I stop sharing my screen, I can pop the link in the chat for you. I don't want to test the tech lords on this. I feel like I'll stop sharing my screen or something, but I'll pop that link in the chat. And that is a really good, again, high level how NSF operates. We'll get more into detail about how the review process works. And then you can also interact with other program officers as well and get an idea of how they're running their programs. And you will find that program officers have quite a bit of latitude on how they run their programs. So having a good relationship with your program officer is really important, so you know the details on how to submit your proposal. So that'll be a really good opportunity in early December to learn more about submitting your proposal as well. Webinars like this one are really valuable, so congratulations, you're already ahead of the curve by attending. I should also say that we hold webinars often through the IARPC platform, and they're all recorded and available online. So you can feel free to look at our other webinars. We did one on research coordination networks, on RAPIDS and eagers and things like that. So they're really good resources. And as we've been saying throughout the webinar, your program officers are probably, I'm biased, but your best resource to go to talk about how to move forward with a potential proposal. We also just wanted to provide a quick update on research support and logistics. We have a very strong RSL program that really just helps our scientists get to the field, get around the field, stay safe doing their fieldwork, and have access to different types of resources that might be really hard to come by, given that we know that it is hard to get to the Arctic. It can often be dangerous to work in the Arctic. So we invest quite a bit of time and energy in making sure that our scientists can travel around safely and do their work with the best support possible. So we have a new prime contractor for our RSL team, and that is Battelle Arctic. Again, all of this information is outlined in the solicitation. So it provides you all the information of what kind of resources that we may have, some of the links that you can go to, and who to reach out to. But we have program officers for our RSL team too. So for fieldwork in Alaska or on research vessels would be Dr. Frank Rack. For fieldwork in Greenland or at Summit Station would be Dr. Jennifer Mercer. And then we also, some of our program officers spent quite a bit of time. Renee Crane and Roberto did a wonderful job revising the IARPC principles for conducting research in the Arctic. That include accountability, communication, respect, relationships, and stewardship, excuse me. The Arctic section takes the interaction between our scientists and residents in the Arctic very seriously. We think about those ethics really deeply, so I encourage all of my PIs to too. Reviewers will also be looking into that. So just keep in mind that these are other resources for you to look into. Again, the RSL team is there to help you. Some of them are online here, but we just wanted to highlight that that's another resource for you if you are thinking about going out to the field and need some more help to make that happen. So with that, thank you very much for listening to us. As promised, we left plenty of time for Q&A. Here are the email addresses for the cognizant program officers on the solicitation. So you can feel free to reach out to us and ask us any questions. So with that, I will stop sharing and we can open up for questions. So if you want to ask a question, sorry, Liz, go ahead. I think you were probably going to do the.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and that'll pop you to the top of my participants list, and I will invite you to unmute. That way we just don't have lots of people trying to talk at once. I've seen several people ask about the recording for this session. It will be on the event page. I'll drop the link in the chat again. And we'll also be able to add the slides. Colleen, do you want to start with the questions?
Yeah, sure. And I see Roberto also put in the Navigating NSF Systems webinar as well. So thanks, Roberto, for doing that. So that is embedded in the chats. And then, okay, so from Gail R, the NSF grant proposal submitted with grants.gov using Workspace. Greg, do you want to take this one since we have some new processes that you might want to highlight? You're muted.
Give me a second to make sure I pull up the right info to answer that question. So why don't you go ahead to another one while I make sure I'm pulling that right up.
So, and Naomi also included the new link to our new contractor that you can go and look at some resources too. So thank you very much for that, Naomi. Austin asked, are we required to use these logistic contractors, or can we use contractors we already work with? So you are not required to go through our logistics contractor. They are very helpful, but you can really do your logistics how you best fits your project. So we have PIs who often want to plan their own travel, can buy their own equipment that they want to use their grant funds to do that. That being said, you're also, that will come out of your science budget though, just to keep that in mind. That being said, having the logistics contractors help you with things they are well connected with us, and it might be an easier way to do that. And I see Renee Crane is online. Renee, she's one of our RSL program officers, so maybe I'll let her chime in if she wants to add anything more.
Hey, I'm Renee Crane. I'm with the Arctic Research Support and Logistics Program, and I wanted to suggest anyone who doesn't want to use the Arctic Research Support or the Arctic Contractor, Battelle Arctic Research Operators, it's probably best if you talk to your program officer too to see, because there is such a funding limit on the grant budget. There may be ways that we can assist you in using the contractor that you would prefer to work with. In many locations, it makes sense to work with. Maybe it's a village corporation, maybe you're working in Canada. So there's some other places where the Arctic contract that we have may not be the best option. But I think we can also find ways to support field work outside of our contract, but using the research support and logistics program to help with some of those costs. So definitely talk with your program officer that you know is most closely aligned with your topic, and we'll make sure we engage on how to best provide support for the project.
Thanks, Renee. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but given that this is your space, I wanted to make sure that you could correct anything that I said. But what Renee alluded to that's really important, and which is why I encourage grad students, especially to really work with the RSL team, is number one, they just know what they're doing and they're very well versed in how to get around the Arctic and get around the Arctic safely. But with those logistics costs, they are like in addition to your $40,000 science budget. So that can help you kind of get around the Arctic without, having, half of your science budget going to trying to get somewhere really remote. We know that travel costs in the Arctic can be exorbitant. So that is one way that you can kind of fit in your science, your kind of science within that $40,000 budget, which is something to keep in mind. Greg, do you want to go ahead with the submission process?
Sure. So the question was whether or not the NSF proposals need to be submitted through grants.gov using Workspace. That is one of the mechanisms that you can use to submit a proposal to this competition. Let me broaden it out just a little bit. When you look at a solicitation for an NSF program, it will tell you in the proposal preparation instructions what the submission mechanisms are. Generally, there are 3 that are potentially available, and a given program will choose which of them to use. There's Fastlane, which has been there for a long time for NSF, and there's research.gov and there's grants.gov. For this particular solicitation, you can use any one of those 3 mechanisms. I will say the agency as a whole, NSF, is gradually moving toward research.gov and away from Fastlane, but that's a gradual process, and what I would just do is encourage everyone to always look at the solicitation because it has those instructions. But yes, grants.gov is one of the 3 for this program.
Thanks, Greg. All right, I have exhausted the questions in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand, don't be shy, or put more questions in the chat. While you are thinking about that, I will introduce our NSF colleagues who are also online, so you know who they are. First is Dr. Alan Pope. He is our new program officer for Polar Cyber Infrastructure. So hi, Alan, welcome. Thanks for coming. And he's waving hi, thanks. And then let's see who else we have online. Kate Ruck is a contractor with NSF. Hi, Kate. She makes everything work within our section. So thanks for coming, Kate, and calling in. And then let's see, Renee, you heard from Renee. She is one of our RSL program officers. Simon Stevenson is online. He is the section head for the section for Arctic Sciences. And Katya Kantar is our AAAS fellow. So really good. Hi, Katya. Hi, Simon. So these are all of your NSF contacts too that you can reach out to if you have any questions. Okay, so from Natalie. Roberto, do you want to take this one?
Start, certainly. All right, so Nellie asks, would it be possible or appropriate to develop PhD research into a postdoctoral opportunity fellowship? And which solution would be best for this? So that's really a 2-part question, right? So I don't see anything that prevents from developing PhD research into potential postdoctoral opportunities. Right now, the Office of Polar Programs and Arctic Sciences section does not have a specific solicitation for postdoctoral opportunities. And so the key, I think, would be, starting with the Doctoral Dissertation Improvement Research Grant, of course, as the initial sort of opportunity and mechanism for that research, that science support of your research, and then working, throughout your graduate career as you are applying for positions, postgraduate level work, working with potential host institutions on existing either active projects that they already have, or with new projects that you would be contributing to, and potentially then co-developing a proposal that would provide that postdoctoral support. At least that's sort of the current practice within Arctic Observing Network, the AM program. Some of the other science programs might work slightly differently. I can allow Colleen and Greg to weigh in on how ARCS operates in that regard.
Sorry, go ahead, Greg. I see you're unmuted.
If you want to talk about maybe social science, because we don't have Erica here for that, that might be a good question for folks. But what Roberto said is basically what I would say. The one thing that on a very practical level, for becoming a postdoc and writing your own proposal, only some institutions will let you do that. And it really is up to the institution to decide who gets to be the principal investigator for a proposal submitted to NSF or to any other agency for that matter. So only some institutions will let a postdoc submit that person's own proposal. But if your institution does it, then certainly submitting a proposal to ARCS for a research project that you are leading as a PI is totally fine. We don't have a standalone postdoc fellowship program or track for ARCS either, but that's yeah, certainly backing up what Roberto said.
Yeah, and it would be a similar answer for Arctic social sciences too. That being said, we know that given COVID-19 and the global health crisis, we know that early career researchers and graduate students are going to be disproportionately affected by the situation, and that you can't go to the field, your fieldwork has been delayed, you're trying to figure out what your next career step is. So we are actively brainstorming within NSF on how to best support you to make sure that you stay in science given everything that's going on. So if you have ideas on how we can help you, please let us know. We obviously won't be able to do everything, but we want to hear your creative ideas on how to make sure that we're supporting people through these kind of unprecedented times, because we know it'll affect you the most. So please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what would be most helpful. Okay, so question from Angela. Are costs only valid for after the award date, or are they reimbursable between submission and award date going forward? So typically they are valid at the cost from the award date. In some cases, your program officer can sign off on a 90, so for about allowable costs of 90 days before your official award date. That being said, I would hate for you to pay for something out of pocket and then end up, not getting the award and things like that. So I just want you to be very careful. I tell most people just to wait until the award is in hand, that it's official, to make that happen. But if there's something that you had to pay for like 30 days ahead of time, often you can work with your program officer and those 90-day pre-award costs can be approved. Greg, did you want to add something to that?
No, I was just being prepared if there was a question. I guess I would say, yeah, the one thing about the 90-day pre-spending authority is it is technically at the institution's risk. And even though we can say we don't have an objection to it, that's not the same thing as saying that you're 100% sure nothing's going to go wrong. So unfortunately, that's one of those things that varies from place to place. Some institutions will take on that risk because they can. Some institutions won't, and you really sort of have to find out working with your advisor. There's some other details to the question about paying participants, co-production of knowledge, research partners, that sort of thing, Colleen. And I don't know if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, did you want to take that one, or would you like me to?
Why don't you go ahead and start, and then
Okay.
I was thinking about something, but I sort of want to see where this goes.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the question from Margaret is, can we use funds to pay participants or with the co-production of knowledge principles research partners? And during times of COVID, can we use the funds to pay for connectivity cost? So overall, budget questions go to your institution and what they are willing to take on as an allowable cost. That being said, I've been a PI on projects that have worked really closely with Indigenous partners and Indigenous communities in which I also wanted to pay them for their time. So yes, there are, I have worked for institutions. I don't want to speak on behalf of your institution, but for example, I worked at the University of Colorado and I was allowed to write in honoraria for my participants. I was allowed to pay for their travel to meetings. So that being said, I think at like kind of more of a project level, I would want you to talk to your partners on what would make the most sense. So I would write in substantial amounts of money for honoraria, but then my Indigenous colleagues said, this is really not the best method because we need to, fill out I-9s and W-2s, and then we're in the federal tax system and blah, 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 blah. And so maybe like a gift card would have been better for that. So that's something that you'll want to talk to your sponsored research projects office and see what they are willing to kind of allow in your budget. But yes, you can have funds to pay participants, to pay contractors. You can use it to pay honoraria. And during times of COVID, can we use the funds to pay for connectivity costs? I think, again, that would be a question for your sponsored project office, but I see Roberto and Greg might have something to add to that. I think that should be okay.
I'll start first. So my recent experience in the last few months, in general, NSF allows a lot of flexibility to the grantee institutions in terms of reprogramming funds, for their different awards and grants. But of course, the question, should go first to the sponsored research office, sort of the authorized organizational representative of your institution to determine what are the allowable costs and award conditions that they've accepted. What I was going to say, I think that if there can be a strong, assuming that those costs are allowable from the institution point of view, and you can make a strong justifiable case that this new expense or this change in expenditure advances or is within scope of the original award and advances the goals and the successful completion of that project, then in general, that should be an allowable and approvable expenditure.
Thanks, Roberto. And I'll also just add, we know it's impossible to predict what the next year will bring, especially given COVID type restrictions. We're trying our best to get people out to the field, but our main priority is to make sure that NSF funded researchers are not a vector of COVID into Arctic communities. So just keep that in mind, that we're playing it very safe and conservatively there to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe. So that being said, as you're creating your project and your budget, we know that there's quite a bit of uncertainty on your end too. So we have a couple of tools in our toolbox to make that work. One is when we talk to you, we might ask for like a contingency plan if you can't go out to the field. We also have things like no cost extension if you have to delay your project by a year. That gives you a little bit more time to spend your money. Also, if your proposal is recommended for an award at that stage, when we have better clarity on what's going on, we can also work with you to revise your budget at that time. So 6 or 8 months down the road, we have more clarity on what's going on. You might need to switch to more virtual situations. Then we can kind of move around your budget, move your budget around at the award stage to give you more flexibility there too. So again, this is just reaching out to us on what makes the most sense for your project. Okay, Vendi has a question. If a proposal is successful, when are the funds available? Does the timeline vary if funding also goes towards fieldwork? Thank you. So that's actually a really good question. When I was a PI, as soon as I got the award letter, I started spending money. But I think you will definitely want to wait for the award letter in hand. I think the one thing that you'll want to keep in mind is that when the program officers make a recommendation, you will get you will get a happy email from us saying we've decided to recommend your proposal for an award. That's not the final award. Ours is just a recommendation, and then it needs to go through a series of approval processes. And so it might take a couple of weeks or a month or two after we recommend your proposal for an award for you to actually have an official award, and your institution will have funds in hands to make that happen. So just keep that in mind. Ask again, you will want to talk to the people at your institution, because the award goes to the institution. It doesn't go to you. That's something to keep in mind. So they will be the ones that you can ask questions on when you can start spending the money, how you can start spending the money, what kind of receipts you need to keep, and things like that. All institutions have really different rules about that.
Colleen, I might just add as a background piece of information for folks, generally speaking, what happens when the award is made is when the award letter goes out, there's a certain amount of money available in our system. It doesn't actually go into the bank account of the university, for example. It's still here. It's a reimbursement. If you incur an expense, the university then pulls money down from that amount of money to reimburse the expenses. So that's just sort of background for folks to know about. And that's why those receipts that Colleen was talking about are so important. And everybody does it a little bit differently. So your institution is really the place to go.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, any other questions at all? These are all really good questions. Thank you. Again, you have the option to raise your hand if you want to do that too. Okay, so from Gail, to clarify, these are grant reimbursable agreements. I'm not sure I understand the question. I see you typing, Gail, so I'll let you type, or if you want to speak up, you can. Okay, in other words, the applicant spends money, submits receipts, and is reimbursed to their institution. That is normally how it works, but it also can be your institution can just buy something outright for you. Again, it really depends on the institution, and they might manage doctoral dissertation improvement grants differently. So typically, you know, in my cases, like my institution wanted to like book everyone's travel. Other institutions might let people book their own travel so they can get credit card points and then get reimbursed later. Again, these are questions that will have to go to your institution. But yes, at a very general level, you know, the grant, you will spend money and then receipts will be submitted in some way and then you might be reimbursed. But again, it's critical to talk to people who are managing grants at your institution to see what process they do, because every institution will be different. So from Mark, are there any conflicting issues between DDRIG and the GRFP? There shouldn't be. So for those of you who, again, we're getting into acronym world, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program is another program at NSF that actually supports graduate students in the earlier stage of their graduate program. So typically the GRFP is something that you would apply for maybe in your senior year of undergraduate, or maybe your first year or two of graduate school, to support those really early kind of formative years of graduate school. The DDRIG solicitation is really meant to support when you have a dissertation project in hand and you're ready to move forward to do the research to write your dissertation. That is meant to support that research. So again, with DDRIGs, you're not allowed to support salary for yourself. And you'll see in the solicitation that there's a bunch of rules on what you can use the DDRIG funds for or not. But typically the DDRIG will be something that you'll be applying for later on in your graduate career. Any other questions at all? If you're all like, go ahead, Roberto.
Maybe just a quick sort of follow-up or addition to that last comment about sort of the timing of the submission to the Doctoral Dissertation Research Improvement Grant. You know, again, it probably varies from institution to institution or program to program, but in general, you know, if we want to talk about sort of that broad applicability, it tends to happen at or around the time that graduate students reach candidacy, so have defended their PhD proposal. That's not always the case, but typically, again, it is focused in terms of, you know, being at that stage, ready and capable of conducting that doctoral research, that data collection, et cetera, the analyses. And also keeping in mind, you know, the conditions or the limitations that there's only one resubmission opportunity, except under very rare circumstances. But you know, so if you apply too early, you know, you risk minimizing your chances potentially if you're not at that stage where, you know, you are primed and ready to collect those data for your dissertation. So another consideration just to keep in mind, and that's something you would discuss with your advisor, with your graduate committee in terms of your preparation and readiness for submission.
Thanks, Roberto. That's a really good clarification. And I think another way to think about it too is like, I feel like the GRFP is like investing in the person, the scientist, the student, whereas the DDRIG is really investing in the project. So you want to have this kind of contained project that you're asking a research question, setting hypotheses. I know, you know, fields will do that differently, but it's really investing in that project. So that's another difference between those programs as well. Okay, if an applicant is in the midst of their dissertation, should they include in the proposal work that has already been started or just propose future work? That's a really good question. So I think this might be something that we might want to talk about your individual projects. So I would say, I feel like when I was applying for DDRIGs, I feel, you know, when you're going through grad school, you're doing a ton of pilot projects, you're trying to figure out, like, you're collecting data, you're playing with different, you know, lab analyses and things like that. So I feel like no matter what, you're going to be in the middle of something when you apply for this. That's just the nature of grad school, right? And you might be kind of halfway through your fieldwork and your dissertation, but it's a dissertation research improvement grant, right? And I think those words are critical. So you might want to contextualize it. Like I have, this is my dissertation part, and I know other grad students who had funding from one resource and a DDRIG, and just were really clear in their application on kind of how they were supporting different aspects of their proposal. So I would say yes, if you're in the middle of it, but you want to improve your research in some way, then you can certainly submit a proposal. And I would say, Emily, when you're ready, put together your 1 or 2 pager, and then whichever program that you want to submit to, then the program officer can provide you more guidance on how to structure that proposal. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Colleen, I guess to take that and generalize it a little bit, just as a tip for sort of thinking about the longer term also, a proposal that comes in that has, there are requirements for these that are in the solicitation, and Colleen talked about that, but I'm thinking of more generally, a proposal that comes in for a project that is got a little bit of work that you've already demonstrated that the baseline ideas are it should work, right? We've thought this through, we've done some pilot work, we've got a little bit of starting data. Generally speaking, tends to review a little bit more competitively than something that is completely brand new without that sort of support in there. So it's but you don't want to have too much of that, because then you run out of space to talk about what you actually want to do in the future. So it's a little bit of a balance, I guess. Just thinking about things for the longer term.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. That's really good proposal writing advice too. Okay, Melissa, will there be a webinar in the future about the GRFP or any online resources that you can share? So the GRFP is actually separate from our section. I don't believe any of our program officers are directly involved in the GRFP. Roberto just put the link in the chat to that. That being said, they support Arctic Sciences research. I would definitely, I am a GRFP fellow. It was absolutely critical in me to support my early career and be able to kind of have some freedom to explore different aspects of the graduate research fellowship program. So I would highly recommend that if you are at that career stage to apply and to reach out to those program officers. So there are other program officers who are running the GRFP, and there are lots of online resources. It's a very high profile program. And definitely look into that. But unfortunately, we will not be running that webinar, but other people at NSF would be. Can the grant cover editor costs for dissertation review? So we have a list of allowable and unallowable costs in the solicitation for this grant. So take a look at that. I don't remember if this one is listed or not. I feel like we wrote this thing so long ago. Take a look at that list. And if it is not listed there, then we can take a look and see if that is an allowable cost or not. For some reason, I would lean no, but I'm looking at Roberto and Greg. Go ahead.
So I'm looking at the solicitation,
Yes.
and of
That
things
would be
that we
smart.
specifically said are not. It doesn't fall specifically in the wording under the category of things that are not, except that, yeah, I think that's one we would have to we'd have to look at again in more detail.
Yeah, we would have to look.
It's not explicitly excluded, but the list of things that are allowed is also described as illustrative, but not comprehensive. So that's yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. So we can figure that out at proposal submission stage too.
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan, going off of Emily's question a bit, can the proposal be a deeper dive into something that exists within the scope of a current NSF grant? Where is that line? So yes, I was a graduate student on kind of my PI's kind of bigger, more senior NSF grants, but I wanted to kind of take a little bubble of that was kind of thinking in my training and how I was being trained under that NSF grant, but I wanted to kind of do my own complementary dissertation research, but that was not covered under the scope of that current NSF grant. So absolutely, that line, Greg or Roberto, do you want to take a stab on where that line would be? Because I think we would say that's going to really depend, right?
That's going to really depend.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad you agree.
That's going to really depend. Yes.
Sorry if that comes across as flip, but no, the details matter in this case. But the idea that you'd be building your DDRIG to improve something that you have support for the core idea on, yeah, sure, that makes sense to me.
Agreed.
Thanks, Greg and Roberto. And Alan just put more information on the GRFP too. So thanks, Alan, for including that. So we have about 4 minutes left. It's been a very engaging Q&A. These are great questions. And maybe I'll just, maybe one more question. I know we're probably all getting ready to, I know it's 3 o'clock here and I'm very much looking forward to my weekend, and I'm sure you all are too. So if there's one more question maybe that we can take, if there's anything else pressing. When is the webinar for the GRFP? I actually don't know, since I'm not a program officer in that program, but take a look at the link that Alan and Roberto posted.
Yeah, I'll just speak up really quickly here to say GRFP runs on a pretty strict schedule. The applications vary within about a week, depending on the exact program, but that deadline just passed this past week. So my guess is that webinars will be in the summer or early fall next year, but keep an eye out on the GRFP website for any information there.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, and the recording of the webinar, Liz, I believe, posted a link to that, right, Liz?
And I will post it again. And are there any other questions, or should I do my sort of wrap up of here's where you can find the recording, etc.?
Renee wants.
Yeah, well, it looks like everyone wants to say something. Go ahead, Greg and Roberto.
Well, go ahead, Roberto, if you wanted to say something. I think you were calling attention to Renee, so maybe I'll.
That's right. I wanted Renee to speak up.
Yeah, I really just wanted to encourage everyone to submit their proposals. You have to be in it to win it. Don't be discouraged. Don't let the paperwork get in your way. Call the program officers, call multiple program officers and talk to them. This is really a great opportunity. We haven't had these fellowships in some of these science programs ever. So really take this opportunity, give us some great proposals to take a look at, and I really encourage you to submit.
And I'll just back up everything Renee said, but say one other thing also, Rich. Just for me personally, as a program officer, my job is to help you be as successful as you can be. Of course, my job is to help all of my other PIs be as successful as they can be, right? But we can't do our job without your ideas, without you reaching out to us. And so please don't be intimidated. The worst thing you're ever going to get from me in an email is, I can't talk today, but here are some other dates that might work, and we're going to have a chat, okay? Honestly, please reach out to us. We're here for you.
Roberto, any final words?
I was just putting it in the chat. Yeah, please don't be shy. You know, we're here to serve you, the community,
Yeah.
especially early career students. You know, building the future generation workforce of Arctic science researchers. So.
Awesome. All right, Liz, off to you.
All right. So I'm putting in the chat right now where you'll be able to find the webinar recording. You can find that on the event page for this webinar. You'll also be able to find it on our YouTube. On our YouTube, you will find every other webinar we've done, so other program manager chats. And I also strongly encourage you to sign up for an IARPC collaborations account if you don't have one already, because you'll get event alerts for things like this event. You'll also be able to collaborate with other folks in the Arctic research space. It's a really, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but it's a really great space for collaboration in Arctic research. I've also just put the slide up again that has the website, so iarpccollaborations.org, and also our social media, which is another place if you'd prefer to get updates on when we're having webinars like this one. So again, you know, we'll have the webinar recording up for you, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all the NSF staff, for Roberto, Colleen, and Greg for taking the time to present today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
My
weekend.
pleasure. And thanks to Liz and IARPC.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.